Hi friends, thank you for tuning in to the Concussion Coach podcast. I am Bethany Lewis, the Concussion Coach. I'm a neurological occupational therapist and certified life coach, and I specialize in guiding people through their concussion recovery journey. I am passionate about helping people understand their injury, speed up their recovery, and reclaim control over their life post-concussion. The purpose of this podcast is to help increase awareness of concussions and the impact they can have on a person's life, and to bring hope to people who have suffered a concussion and those who love them. I firmly believe that sharing stories and knowledge about concussions will bring important light and understanding to this misunderstood and often invisible injury. The information in this podcast is meant to bring that awareness and hope and is not meant as medical advice. The opinions shared are those of the interviewees and my own. If you are suffering with lingering concussion symptoms, I have created a concussion coaching program specifically for you. I will be your mentor to guide you through your recovery journey, offering help with understanding and managing your symptoms, setting achievable goals, and learning how to manage your own thoughts and nervous system in order to get control over your life again. If this program sounds like something that would help you or someone you love, sign up for a free consultation. In the consultation, you'll get valuable information and resources and gain hope for your future. Sign up for your free consultation at the link in the show notes or at my website, www.theconcussioncoach.com. Hi friends, welcome back to the Concussion Coach podcast. Before I introduce my guest today, I just wanted to make sure that you know about the free guide that is available on my website. It's the 5 best ways to support your loved one dealing with a concussion. If you have a friend or a family member who is struggling with post-concussion symptoms, or if you're the one struggling and would like your loved ones to know more about what you're going through and how they can help, please head over to my website, theconcussioncoach.com, and download the free guide. My guest today is Angela Hanscom, and I am so excited for this conversation today. I was introduced to Angela by my sister-in-law, who sent me the interview that Angela did with Ginny Urich on the 1000 Hours Outside podcast. Is it 1000 hours?
Yes.
Okay. I was like, wait, is it 10,000? My brain is like this. Okay. Which I think that conversation happened a few years ago, but I just listened to it recently. And when I heard it, I was like, oh my goodness, I would love to bring Angela on and pick her brain about outside and nature and the benefits of it and how it can help with people who are dealing with TBIs. So I just think that this message is so important. I'm so grateful for you being here today. Thank you, Angela.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Absolutely. So I also wanted to share on here when I told my sister-in-law that I got my dream, my wish is coming true, and I get to interview you. She wanted me to share this, and I wanted to put it out here on the actual podcast because I want people to hear how impactful your work is. So this is what my cute sister-in-law said. Please, please, please tell her that her interview on the 1000 Hours Outside changed my life. It changed my approach to parenting and my relationship with my kids and my priorities in life. It got me hooked on that podcast, which opened my heart to homeschooling and truly changed my whole family's trajectory. I'm so excited that you're interviewing her. It's so cool. So,
Oh, that's nice.
yes. So Corbin says thanks.
That's good.
Yeah, it's so awesome. Okay, so I'm going to introduce you. I'll read your bio here. So, Angela Hanscom is a pediatric occupational therapist and the founder of TimberNook, an award-winning nature-based program that has gained international popularity. She holds a master's degree in occupational therapy and an undergraduate degree in kinesiology, the study of movement, with a concentration in health fitness. Angela's book, Balanced and Barefoot: How Unrestricted Outdoor Play Makes for Strong, Confident, and Capable Children, discusses the effects of restricted movement and lack of outdoor playtime on overall sensory and motor development in children. When Angela is not speaking about nature's therapeutic benefits or training new TimberNook providers, she enjoys spending time with her husband, Paul, and 3 children in the rural town of Barrington, New Hampshire, where the concept behind TimberNook and Balanced and Barefoot were first born. So this is going to be such a good conversation. So Angela, as a fellow OT, I would love to hear how you got into occupational therapy in the first place, kind of what drew you to it, and then how you ended up focusing in on pediatrics specifically.
Yeah. Oh, that's a great question. I actually wanted to be a physical therapist. And so all my schooling was like, so kinesiology and all that stuff was because I took all the sciences to do physical therapy. But ironically, I worked for a camp for children with special needs. And I really fell in love with it. And I was like, wait, I don't want to work just on the physical aspects of development. I want to work on all aspects of children. And my mother at the time was like, have you considered occupational therapy? And I had only seen occupational therapy for adults and not for children. And so when I looked into it, I was like, oh, this is what I want to do. And so
That's
that brought me to get the degree in occupational therapy, not to TimberNook, but to at least pursue that path.
That's awesome. Yes. Moms can be so helpful. Way to go, mom. So then yes, if you could just give us a little bit more of your
Yeah.
story, how Balanced and Barefoot came about and then TimberNook as
Yeah.
well.
Sure. So um, well, actually, it was when I had my own children, is when I really started down this path. So I worked in all different settings. I worked in hospitals. I worked with preemies when they first go home, in school settings. And then most of my experience was in what we call like a sensory clinic, where everything's engineered to be sensory.
Mhm.
And I remember, yeah, one day one of my daughters came in to visit, and she's pretty grounded, pretty regulated, and she was like jumping in the ball pit and jumping from swing to swing, and her arousal level was going up and up, and I was like, oh, this is interesting. Like that this environment it can be a little dysregulating, like everything was brightly colored in our clinic, everything was plastic or engineered to be sensory. And I remember bringing in little boxes of sand or beans and calling that sensory. And
Mhm.
so I actually just started paying attention to that kind of stuff and being like, oh, wow, that's kind of interesting. And then I remember being in a clinic, actually in a training for astronaut training. It's where have you heard of that? Where you set a child on a board. It's like a spinny board and you spin them in all different directions and it helps with like body awareness and stuff. Well, anyway, the lady in there was like, we're not going to see kids rolling down the hills anymore. And she was like, kids are not spinning in circles, so like she's like, the number one thing you're going to have to treat is balance. And so I was like, oh, interesting. And then I had a little boy come into the clinic setting that didn't like wind in his face. And I remember thinking, how do I treat that indoors? Like, do I get a fan and blow the fan on the child? Like, noticing a lot of kids not wanting to get dirty. They didn't want to get glue on their fingers or to get messy. And so, and then right around that time, my second daughter was born, and I was working part-time, and I had to like go back and forth, and I actually just wanted to stay home with my kids. So I decided to stay home with them and to like leave my job. And my plan was never to run an organization or to be even a manager of a clinic or anything. Like I just wanted to be a traditional OT, go home and do that as long as possible, and then maybe I'd go back. But it was not. So this is very ironic for me. And so I joined a mom's group right around that time because that was kind of the thing to do at the time. It was about 15 years ago. And people were just asking me questions. They knew I was an occupational therapist. And one was like, my child's spinning in circles all the time. Why is that? You're an OT. Tell me why they're spinning all the time. And another one asked why her son had trouble paying attention in preschool. And I was like, wait, isn't preschool supposed to be play? Like I was so confused. And then it was time for my daughter to go to kindergarten. And at the time it was still morning kindergarten back then. It was right before the shift in our area at least.
Mhm.
And I remember the teacher meeting with us the day before school started, just with the parents, and she said, "This is not kindergarten like you guys remember growing up." She said it's going to be more like first grade. She said, "My husband's going to pre-cut everything at nighttime, so your kids don't have to worry about that skill of cutting." She said, "If they don't put if they don't tie their shoes." If they can't do that yet, please put like Velcro shoes on them or elastic laces because we don't have time to teach them how to tie their shoes here. She said 5 minutes for snack, but if that gets in the way of their curriculum, she said it will be a working snack, so they'll have to eat while they do their paperwork. And then she said 15 minutes for recess. And she said, but when it snows, it will be an indoor recess because we don't have time to change your children into their snow gear. And so this whole theme of no time for
Mhm.
developmental skills kept popping up. And as an occupational therapist that works on development, I was like, this isn't right. What is happening? But I really enjoyed learning. I grew up actually in Vermont. It was very much play-based, environmentally based. I remember having scissors because I cut myself and I went to the nurse's office to get a Band-Aid.
Yes.
I remember my teacher saying little bunny foo foo, like learning letters, but very, very basic. And
Mhm.
I loved learning. And I wanted my child to really love learning from an early age. But what happened was a month into the kindergarten program, my daughter Joelle, who's now 20, came home and said, I hate school. And that really broke my heart. I was like, wow, like to start off with that mentality is, so I ended up
Mm.
pulling her out of school, not my plan. And that's what you're going to keep hearing is none of this was my plan. And I started homeschooling for a couple of years. I didn't homeschool very long, but I did it enough to start learning about different educational philosophies. Like I was really interested in Reggio Emilia, where they use the environment as a third teacher and for inspiration of learning. I was really interested in Waldorf, where there was a lot of movement throughout the day, a lot of natural materials. And then Finland, I started learning about Finland where the kids were, barefoot half the time. They didn't go to school till they were age 7. And then they went into the trades at age 16. They were in the river dissecting fish to learn about ecology.
Mm.
And but they were scoring way higher in math and science than we were here in America. So I was like, what are they doing over there? And then right around that time, I noticed there was not a lot of kids playing outside. We have 12 acres of woodland here and about 50 acres of conservation surrounding it. So we kind of live in the boonies. But we'll take a shortcut through a neighborhood. And at the time, there's a lot of kids that were the same age as my children growing up in that neighborhood. And I never saw them outside. And so I was like, oh, this is very interesting. What is going on here? So right around that time, yeah, I noticed there was like no one playing in that neighborhood. And so I was like, where are all the kids? Like, why are they not playing outside?
Mhm.
I grew up where we played till the lights went off type thing. So that kind of, I knew I wanted to do something with getting kids outdoors. And I thought it was in the form of nature classes, till I ran one. And I had a parent come up to me with her son in hand, and she was like, basically like, can you tell me why the leaves change color? Tell my son why the leaves change color. And I was like, it has something to do with a pigment. Like I was trying to remember from my science classes in high school.
Right.
And it just helped me reflect on, what is my background here? What does an occupational therapist have anything to do with nature programming, right? And so, what I've learned over the years is that, first of all, the people running nature programs back then were environmentalists or naturalists or teachers, and I was none of that. And so, what I've learned is that, the main occupation of a child is play. And outdoor play was an incredibly meaningful occupation. So most of the time, if you ask someone, what's your fondest memory growing up? They're going to say like outdoor play or playing out some memory
Mm.
outside for the majority of the time. But that particular occupation is really at risk in ways that we never anticipated. And so that has kind of become the mission of TimberNook is to restore that really authentic occupation and make it, as real as possible. And that's why it's so therapeutic. And so, um, yeah, so I don't know if you want to ask a
Yeah,
question.
yeah. I was gonna say, can I jump in and ask you a few
Yeah,
questions? Thank
yeah.
you. So you started TimberNook. TimberNook came about first, and then Balanced and Barefoot after that. Is that right?
So they came about, yes, actually, that is right.
Because I just listened to it. I finished listening to it
Yes.
this morning actually, and it's such a good book. And I wish I had read it when I was a younger mom. I'm gonna
Yeah.
like give it to all my friends who have babies. But I think you did mention TimberNook in the book, so it makes sense that that was the process. So just a couple thoughts. The sensory clinic. I feel like we still have those like kind of outpatient
Mhm.
clinics for occupational therapy that are we would and other therapies that would be considered sensory clinics. Um, I'm just curious. Obviously they pale in comparison to outside, but do you feel like there's a place for them? Are they still helpful?
Yeah, that's a good question. Um I think that there is definitely a place for that. What I traditionally do is I try to get people to step back and to start asking questions about them.
Mm.
So, like, I remember making a lot of OTs mad in the beginning because I would have an image up of a sensory bin, and then I would have an image up of children in giant mud puddles. And I would say, okay, both are considered a sensory experience. However, if our objective is to create change to the senses, which one do you think will be more likely to do that? And
Mm.
almost everyone says the giant mud puddles. And then I ask them, well, why? So I'm trying to take people deeper, like what's going on? in the mud puddles that you're not getting with the sensory bin. And
Hmm.
I'll hear all sorts of things. Like, first of all, the mud puddles is a whole body sensory experience. It's everything. Every aspect of your, development is being challenged there. The ground isn't uneven. There's different smells, there's nature sounds. There's other children that can fit into that space. So now that you're getting communication and, there's like endless opportunities for play, in the mud puddle. Like I might pick up a stick and think of 100 different ways to play with it. And then I might inspire another kid to play with that stick in ways they never thought of. Whereas in the sensory bin, it's restricted, right? So
Hmm.
there's going to be a lot more moderation on making sure the dirt doesn't get out and all that. The adults can step back with the mud puddles and empower child-directed play.
Hmm.
Whereas with the sand pit, like the sand little sand bin, it's like um it's so limiting. I don't know it's just like so it's like it's really hard. And so then when we take OT students and they come out here and they realize that the actual potential and the gift of what we're giving versus what they're used to, it's very hard to go back and to because when you start comparing the therapeutic value of
Hmm.
what you're offering, if that makes
Yeah, oh, I totally believe that.
yeah.
That's super interesting. And I thought it was interesting that I love how much your kids influenced your path here because it was when your daughter was there. Like, I'm sure you had been working with kids all the time. They would come in, you would see how they interacted in that environment. But it wasn't until your daughter came who you knew like what she was like outside of that environment and then saw her in that environment that you realized how
Yeah.
overstimulating it was. Um,
Yes.
so yeah, I thought that was just a really interesting point that yeah, it's helpful to seek people in different environments to understand how that environment is impacting them. Um,
Yes.
and well, actually, I have so many things that I want to bring out here, but and I think we'll talk about this more later. But just as a little like teaser for us, you talked about how the person you were interacting with, I don't remember her name, you're taking some class or something, and she was talking about spinning and how that helped with balance. Can you explain to our audience why spinning helps with balance?
Yeah, of course. Yeah. So basically, like we use spinning as like a way of treatment. And so we'll have swings in our clinics and we'll position children in all different ways and spin them in all different directions. And sometimes it's on their side, sometimes it's upright. And what that does is it helps them to know where their body is in space. And it helps them to get from point A to point B safely on and off playground equipment effectively. It helps with body awareness. And it's the same thing that we do when a child is spinning in circles. Like if they're just spinning in circles on their own, like it's something that we used to do to get dizzy, and then we get back up again and we do it again, or rolling down the hill, right? You're still spinning on your own axis. And again, that really helps children to know where their body is in space. And what's happening is a lot of kids are starting to fall out of their chairs and onto the ground in schools. Like it's becoming more and more of an issue that kids are even running into each other or becoming more and more clumsy and unsafe because we're restricting them so much. So sometimes I'll see an adult say, "Don't spin, you're gonna get dizzy." Or get down from that rock, you're going to get hurt. But when we do that, the adults actually become the barrier to that neurological development that needs to happen so they can become safe in their environment and effective when navigating
Mhm.
different situations.
Yeah, thank you so much. And I think actually there are a lot of other things in re regards to like development, things that I'm
More
gonna
comfy,
want
yeah.
to jump into some more. So thank you for that little teaser there.
Yeah.
Really quick, why don't you tell people what TimberNook is in case they're not
Okay, yeah.
familiar?
So basically what it is, it's different play experiences out in nature. So TimberNook, actually the word TimberNook represents timber is within the trees, and then nook is like a nook or a cranny away from the fears of the adult world. So it's where kids can be kids. It's kind of like a refuge, a place where they have complete agency over their environment. So they create their own societies, their own worlds out there, building forts, having battles or playing house or whatever they want to do out there. And the environment is designed to inspire a higher level of play. And the adults are out there to monitor, I guess, the play. I don't know the best word for that. We're kind of like lifeguards where we are watching and observing and going in if needed. But it's really more for safety and to make sure that we keep it a healthy play balance where it's not we don't want chaos out there. So we are there to monitor that and to support kids with all different abilities and strengths and stuff. But the other children are part of the environment. So it's like, to me, it's true neighborhood play. There's mixed ages out there for a reason, because the real world is, you play with kids of all different ages and kids of all different abilities. So we don't have camps only for children that have special needs. We have a camp where there are children of all different abilities out there, and it's more, again, more real world. And those other children become models for kids. And so more advanced language skills, more advanced play skills draws them into a higher level of transformation. Yeah, it's a really beautiful thing to watch, but
it just sounds like heaven. So,
yeah.
is this like a camp experience? Like who comes to it, and what is the structure? Like
Yeah.
how long is it? I'm just
Yep.
curious.
So we do run summer camps. It actually started as a summer camp. I had a friend it's kind of part of my story is I had a friend say in marketing, I think you should do summer camps. And so because you're more likely to get parents to drop children off. So it started in the form of a summer camp. And I think that starting in the form of a summer camp gave us more freedom. So we are in schools now. We do TimberNook in schools. And if we had started that way, I think it would have really modified what TimberNook is.
Oh,
But
interesting.
because it started in the form of a summer camp, there was ultimate freedom for kids, and that was protected because we saw the benefits of allowing children a space where they can have that freedom to make their own choices. And we want them to be able to think for themselves and to be able to initiate an idea and execute that play scheme independently without an adult telling them what to do because they're losing that ability to play. So it started in the form of summer camps, but we do forest programming year round. We do timber in all different forms. We do it at night experiences. We've done teenagers now because we feel like teens are still craving this play and
Hmm.
probably even delayed because they haven't had that type of experience. So like nighttime warrior camps with glow in the dark battles, like stuff
Okay.
that, super fun. Forest programming, birthday parties. Um, and then now we are doing a lot of field trips here. So we are doing just the schools are desperate
Yeah.
for the social emotional reasons and communication, social skill, all of that is
Yep.
best done through play. So doing a lot of field trips. And then we're also bringing TimberNook into schools and certifying schools to have that program as part of their curriculum if they have woods or an area to do TimberNook behind their schools as well.
So fantastic. And it's all over the world now, right? Where can you
Yeah.
just give us a clue of
Yeah, we're in 4 countries. So Canada, the UK, Australia, and then United States. It's definitely heavily in the United States, and I think there's a good reason for that. I think there's a bigger need here. So,
Mhm.
yeah.
Yeah. Yes, as you're talking about like the things that the ways that kids are delayed. And then and I guess my next question is about the Balanced and Barefoot book. Was it from the your experiences at TimberNook that inspired like the need to get this information out to more people? How did that?
Yeah, so the book came about because what happened was, well, I started running the summer camps. I was just going to do it for one summer. And then I just did every year. I said I'll do it for one more summer. And then what happened was um, my camps were filling so quickly I couldn't meet the demand. And I had parents calling, crying that they didn't get into my program And, they wanted me to do more. And I was like, I can't do more. I wasn't planning on working. Like, I didn't want to do summer camps all summer long. And so right around that time, I had an occupational therapist reach out and a physical therapist saying, can we replicate your program? And that's when I realized I needed to license the program, and we called it TimberNook. And then my plan was going to market in New England because that would have been the easy thing to do. I'm in New Hampshire. But what happened was I wrote an article, and that article was called Why Kids Fidget and What
Mhm.
We Can Do About It, and went incredibly viral. And so then the Washington Post picked it up and it exploded. Times the India Jerusalem Post picked it up. Then I did a TED Talk for Johnson and Johnson in front of 100,000 people. And that's how the message of Balance and Barefoot came about. So clearly, I realized at that time this was like really a message other people needed to hear. And it was a unique thing. And so that's when I realized I needed to write a book.
Awesome. Well, bless you for writing it.
Yeah.
But it's so crazy. It's just so funny to me, like how we've veered from like you're just kind of bringing us back to natural state, like what our bodies crave, what we need, like how we were in the past, and yet we're like it's crazy that we need this message so badly that
Yeah.
we've veered so far. And why don't you share with us? And it was really interesting actually. So as I was listening to the book, um, a lot of the things that you talk about kids having issues with in general are things that are particularly problematic for kids who have experienced a concussion or adults too. Like anybody who has a concussion, some of the post-concussion syndrome symptoms are exactly what you talked about, only probably a little bit more like increased. So specifically the vestibular concerns, so dizziness and being off balance, trouble with attention and focus, being really fidgety, light and noise
Mhm.
sensitivity, overstimulation, eye teaming, like all of these things were, I was listening to your book and I was like, holy cow, this is very, very similar. Um,
Oh, interesting.
so I think that, yeah, I would love to have you speak to how you've seen nature, why unstructured outdoor play, how does that help with all of these developmental issues that people are having, like physically as well as socially and emotionally? This is a really big question, so we should probably break it
Yeah,
down.
yeah.
But I just want to like preface like umbrella this and say these are all the things that are impacted, and I think it's good for people to know about it just in a development like human need issue, but also specifically with people who are dealing with brain injuries, those can be heightened. And so I think that outdoor play and the nature piece can be particularly helpful. Um,
Mm,
so, okay, sorry, that was a lot. So let me like break it down a little bit here. So,
sure.
can you talk about with balanced and barefoot again, those issues that you're seeing come about where kids like how is it that outdoor play addresses issues like your eyes working together well, or that I guess we talked a little bit about the dizziness aspect, but
Yeah.
strength and all of those kinds of things. How is nature so good for those things?
Yeah, okay. Yeah, we can go back to the vestibular sentence a little bit if you want.
Yeah.
So I guess one of the major issues I saw was that kids were constantly in a seated position, like they were being restricted. So my biggest issue is that like it's not just kids with special needs or that have had some sort of trauma. It's like all the children are suffering right now. And so I see TimberNook as that addressing a population-based issue. It's like
Mm,
all the children are suffering, and one reason why is because they're really sedentary. And so the research I was in is that kids were in a chair in America about 9 hours a day. They're seated, and so that can be a problem alone because certain muscles will shorten that should not be shortened, and certain muscles will lengthen that should not be, and that will affect your posture and your gait. And but one of the biggest issues is we know that kids need a lot of movement opportunities, right? Like I recommend at least 3 hours of outdoor playtime a day where they're moving in rapid ways, right? So they need to spin in circles, they need to go upside down, they need to basically move in ways that make adults gasp, right? Climbing trees and the reason why is because in our inner ear are little hair cells and there's fluid in there. And when we are spinning and moving in rapid ways, that moves the fluid back and forth and stimulates those hair cells and develops what we call the vestibular sense. And that sense is the unifying sense for sensory integration. So is underdeveloped because kids are not moving enough, it can affect everything. And so one thing that it does is it helps basically, like we talked about, for a child to know where their body is in space to get from point A to point B safely. And so we talked about that one, but it also helps with the eye muscles, right? So it acts like a tripod for the camera, and it stabilizes all six eye muscles, which is really important for scanning, for reading and writing. And I remember one time having a little boy come in for treatment that he was 7 years old in school and he was holding one eye and he was not able to read. And with vestibular treatment for about 2 weeks, I had him spinning on that board we were talking about and then looking from point A to point B with light pens after. I wanted to see, can he track afterwards? And every time he got to the middle, what we call it the midline, his eyes would lose control, um, like a roller coaster. And I was like, oh, can you imagine trying to read and your eyes would lose control every time? And so with 2 weeks of vestibular treatment, he was able to control his eyes, and it wasn't long before he was able to start reading. And so behavioral optometrists work very closely with occupational therapists, as you know, to work on visual skills. And I've been on some podcasts with them, and they're big proponents of movement. And they also have trampolines and swings in their clinics. So movement will help with body awareness and being safer in your environment. It does help stabilize the eye muscles to work as a team. And it's also helps with attention. So, a lot of these kids are really fidgeting like crazy in ways that I really didn't anticipate. I actually got asked to observe a classroom. Um, and this was part of that article that went viral where these kids were fidgeting like crazy. So they're leaning back in their chairs. So there was like only one point of contact, multiple children in their chairs. One was rocking his body back and forth. Another one was hitting his head with a plastic water bottle. And I was like, what is happening? How long is a recess session? And so they had a 30-minute recess session, which is actually pretty good compared to the 20-minute recess sessions that are standard now. And so I'm like, clearly these kids need to move. And we were going to implement a therapeutic dance program to get them moving in all different ways. And so I ended up doing a little pilot study with a colleague of mine to see if it would improve attention to do that dance program. So we measured their core strength. So we looked at their stomach muscles and back muscles to see how strong they were and compared it to 1984, the standardized norms from back then, the averages from the early 1980s. And then we had them spin in circles. And we wanted to look for just a normal balance reaction. So when I mean having a normal balance reaction, it's like, you're going to try spinning 10 times to one direction, works on one inner ear, and then spin 10 times the other direction, works on the other inner ear. And then close your eyes and try spinning again. So when you take away the visual piece, you're really igniting that vestibular sense. And what we saw is that we should see nystagmus. We should see the eyes move back and forth vigorously after spinning. And what we saw is a lot of kids had no nystagmus at all, which means there's dysfunction with the balance sense. And then after a minute, your eyes should stop moving back and forth, obviously. But there was a lot of kids that had excessive nystagmus. And then some kids were shuffling around, when we're asking them to spin. Some kids were trying to follow their arm around. Kids were falling on the ground. It's like, oh my gosh. So just looking for a normal balance reaction and then combining that with core strength compared to 1984, we found only 1 out of every 12 children could meet most standards. So again, only 1 of every 12 kids. And this is like 12 years ago. So that was really eye-opening. And we're like, clearly these kids need to move more. And what's happening is that vestibular sense, having plenty of movement opportunities, what it does is it turns the reticular activating system on in the brain so you can pay attention. And that's what those kids were doing is they're moving their body back and forth to ignite that vestibular sense so they can actually pay attention when the teacher is talking. And what do adults say, right? When kids are fidgeting, right?
Sit down, stop moving.
Yeah,
Yes.
exactly. So, but clearly those kids need to move, not just in that moment, but they really needed more opportunities to move throughout the day so they could gain the skill of attention. So again, that vestibular sense, plenty of movement opportunities helps with body awareness. It helps with the visual skills. It also helps to be able to pay attention in the classroom. And also helps with emotional regulation, like so you get really frustrated or angry to naturally bring that back down again. And arousal level, like so we keep saying kids are off the wall, they're hyper, but our 20-minute recess sessions aren't doing them justice because if you're already sitting for majority of the day, when you start first moving, your arousal level goes up. So in 20 minutes, now you're really off the wall, and the teachers bring them back in and they're highly dysregulated. It takes a good 45 minutes to an hour for their bodies to regulate and to be able to pay attention in the classroom. So just movement alone, not even talking about outdoor play and the benefits of play, but
Mhm.
just movement alone is going to help children to be able to pay attention and be safer and more capable in their environment.
Yes. So was your article, is that what I know there's so many like videos out there for
Yeah.
movement. Like I wonder if that was inspired like partially influenced by that, but there's I know my kindergartner's favorite thing about school is Danny Go, which is a video series of like to get movement. And I imagine that that's I mean movement is it's better to have some movement than none at all for sure. But it's
Yeah.
probably still not sufficient. Like you're saying that it takes like 45 minutes for the benefit, full benefit of that play experience to come around. Yeah,
Yeah.
you want to say more about that?
Yeah, it takes a good 45 minutes to an hour just to be regulated. But the other issue with like 20-minute recess sessions is you're just figuring out who am I going to play with? What am I going to play? And then the bell rings right when you dive into the play scheme. And we
Hmm.
interviewed kids about recess, and they're like, it's so frustrating because we're just getting to the good part. And then they don't get to actually dive into that play scheme. And that's also critical because we want kids to work on social skills and regulating emotions and solving issues. And that's all done through authentic play. And but
Hmm.
they're not able to have enough time to dive into play schemes that works on those fundamental skills.
Yeah, yes, which I think are also things that everybody needs work on
Yeah.
and will help with that the social the emotional piece too. So
Oh, yeah, huge.
yeah. I well, man, again, you brought up so many things that I think are really important and helpful. Um hmm, like
I
again
know there's so many
like so much to
things.
talk about here. But specifically, well, I guess when you were talking about the vestibular thing and moving and like spinning, I know that my clients who are dealing with post-concussion issues and especially those with the vestibular component of that, the idea of even turning in a circle would probably make them feel sick. And there is vestibular rehab out there and people can, there's
Yeah.
and it's both movement of your body and also just moving your head with your eye, the
Mhm.
head, the body movement, spinning component is all part of that. So it's just, I don't know, again, bringing it back to basics, like you need it. So don't be afraid of it. But if there's ways to walk into it and find somebody who has experience working with vestibular um, clients to help in the vestibular system, like that's going to be really important. And
Yeah.
but that spinning, that motion, that movement is necessary um, to get things
Yeah.
back to how they should be. Do you want to? I would be interested in hearing your thoughts on just a general overstimulation in general, like um, what is the benefit of being outside? Sometimes I know my clients sometimes talk about like, oh, the sun is too bright, like I can't be outside, or there's um usually people are craving nature. Like nature is very therapeutic, and I think a lot of people feel that and recognize it. But for people who like have light sensitivity or are easily overstimulated, how can they access nature? What would your advice be?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I've never been asked that. I think that like for what we do in TimberNook, it's a little different because you're in the shade. You're at like in the wooded. I mean, not all our sites, I guess, but like mo majority of sites, there's a canopy of trees, so
Mm.
it's a little different. So the light isn't usually much of an issue, and it's I guess one of the benefits of that is that it's very calming, very calming stimuli. Um, and it's conducive to sensory integration to be outside. So, because you have plenty of space, especially when you say a classroom of children. So, like when a field trip comes, comparing that to what I see in classrooms where kids are really close to one another and they're bumping into one another, the noise level is higher inside. There's a lot of visual stimuli. And out in the woods, it's different. You can get away from each other. You can choose to play with someone or go play somewhere else. It's very grounding. There's less transitions outside too. So like, for TimberNook, it's hours of play. Whereas in school, it's like every 45 minutes, you're like switch, switch, switch. And when kids have sensory issues, transitions can be hard. So it's very dysregulating.
Mm.
As far as sunlight, if you were going not in the shade, I wouldn't know. I'm not an expert, but I wonder if like, I don't know, like sunglasses.
Yeah. Yeah, no, definitely. That's
Yeah.
sunglasses, hats, that's how people do it.
Yeah, I was gonna say.
Yes, and I think it can be good. And I just would encourage people to take it in baby steps if you can't. If it's too
Yeah.
much, like yeah, do what you can, what you need to be able to allow yourself to be outside, and so
Yeah.
you can like gradually increase the amount of time and hopefully eventually also gradually decrease the amount of external aids that you need to be able to support
Yeah.
yourself to go outside.
Definitely. That's what I was wondering. Good.
Yeah. That was good thought. The point that you made before about how drastically different children's strength is compared to 30 years ago, or 40 years ago, was really, really interesting to me. And I know in the book you mentioned that there was a debate between therapists about whether they should change the norms or because so
Yeah.
many kids are not meeting the standards from back in the day. Where have we landed at this point? I'm just curious, and it's such a fascinating, crazy thing that we're experiencing as a society with that. But
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, so they have changed the norms since I wrote the book. So which is interesting because they were like, do we hold them to the same standards or do we change the norms? And it was, I think this one had to do with grip strength. Like, so all the kids were presenting, not all the kids, but a majority of kids were not able to meet the grip strength from years past. And so they've gone and changed the norms for that. So yeah, it is really sad.
yeah. Well, and it's yeah. And the grip strength matters because when kids play on rope swings or monkey bars, like that's how you develop it and you need it for that. And if kids aren't ever going out on those things, then they're not developing it. So
Yeah.
so interesting. So how about sorry, hang on, let me okay. This is really I think an important topic here and one that hits home for me especially because the how do you deal with people who are afraid of the dangers of being outside? So I think this is a really interesting thing. There's this balance. There's got to be a balance right here between going out and like playing outside and having those experiences that will help develop the skills that you need to be able to do that even more safely versus like playing it safe and not jumping off of the boulder or the rock, like doing like we want to encourage kids to develop those skills and be outside, but we don't want them to be getting hurt badly.
Yeah.
And especially parents of kids who maybe haven't had a concussion, I imagine they're going to be especially careful about the kid's head. So how do you deal with the danger aspect of play outside?
That's a really good question. So we actually just recently had our TimberNook conference, and one of our speakers was from the adventure playground world, which is actually maybe even riskier than TimberNook. I don't know. It might be equivalent, but they play in junkyards, and they did research a number of years ago on an adventure playground where there's a lot of risk taking. There's some similarities with TimberNook because they can use tools, they can create their own forts and stuff. It's not in the woods, but it's more of a junkyard. There's a lot more stuff. TimberNook is a lot more woods and a clean canvas, but and then they compared it to a regular playground and looked at injury reports and hospital reports and found there was more injuries on a typical playground than there were on an adventure playground. And I think because our theory is that because there is more opportunities for risk taking and assessment of risk taking, but the children are very aware of it and are able to help regulate and have practice with that. So they're making better decisions.
Mhm.
Um, And a lot of the playgrounds are fixed and probably not challenging enough. And so they're finding kids are using a lot of playgrounds in inappropriate ways. At TimberNook, it's very, I mean, not gonna, what I don't want to jinx myself. It is actually pretty rare to have a serious injury out there. And I do think the kids are pretty aware and pretty capable of knowing where their limit is. And I watch it all the time, where a child that might be older and might be doing something that a younger child can't, the little child might try to a point and then but they will moderate that and they'll be like, nope, and they'll go back down or they'll do what they can. But most children have very good risk assessment. However, that being said, this past year, for the first time probably ever, we had a public school come out for a field trip. And there was multiple kids that I felt were taking unreasonable risks. I was like, what? Like, there was literally a kid that was going to jump off a boulder into a fort, and I had to intervene. And I was like, I don't think I've ever had to do that. And I was like, do you think this is a good idea? What happens if you slide down right? And he's like, oh, that I'm going to go into those sticks. I was like, yeah, it was like 10 feet off the ground with sticks going up.
Oh,
And I
geez.
was like, so you may want the kids to pull you back up. And he was like, okay. And so they had the kids pull him up. And there was multiple other kids trying to jump off and there was like stumps and they were really not doing proper risk assessment. So I asked, I actually talked to Zoe Malex, who works with the research for gene errors. So gene errors brought sensory integration to the forefront. And so I was like, what is happening? And she's like, most likely what's happening is we've overprotected kids and we've bubble wrapped them so much that here you have boys in third, fourth grade taking inappropriate risks because they were not allowed to at a young age. They were not allowed to fall and figure out where their bodies were and get back up and learn through experience what's appropriate and what's not. And so the real crux of the problem is we're really overprotecting them so much that they really are becoming unsafe and
Mm.
not learning proper risk assessment. So as scary as it might be, it's actually a letting go of fear for a lot of adults of like, I need to trust. I need to let go because it's often adult fears that get in the way of the development.
Hmm. Yes. Like, it's so funny. Like as I have six kids, and so like but I do have an occupational therapy background, and so it's just funny as I was listening to the book and as I'm thinking, like observing my own parenting, I'm like, man, there's such a pull both ways. Like there's the
Yeah.
natural, like I don't want my baby to get hurt, but also the like, no, this is actually really important for your development and it's going to be good for your skills and your whole life. And so, yeah, figuring out how to
Yeah.
how to do it.
How old are your kids, if you don't mind?
My oldest is 16 and my youngest is 5. So
Okay.
they're all
Yes.
home. They're all like I still have a little bit of influence on most of them. So but it's yeah, it's interesting, yeah, thinking back and like observing the kids are so naturally inclined to want to play and to be creative and to do the things. And I think that providing them that kind of environment really makes all the difference. And so I appreciate so much that you're bringing this out there to the world, and especially as we spend more time in front of screens and with AI and the virtual stuff. Like I just there's so much um, pulling away from natural experiences and like real life, touch grass, like real world experiences, and we need that so badly. So again, I just really appreciate your work, and I bringing up virtual reality. I would be curious to hear your thoughts on that. Like because you can do virtual things where you're hiking or doing, like I imagine, actually I don't know, I'm not super
Yeah.
familiar with virtual reality stuff, but um I like you can experience nature but safely would be my guess as to part of what is attractive about that for some people. What are your thoughts on virtual reality?
I think that it keeps, um, especially I'm thinking of teenage boys in particular, but it almost keeps them in their comfort zone. So
Mhm.
like you're not actually taking real risks. You're like in your comfort zone. It's like it's safe still. Do you know what I mean? Like, and
Mhm.
it's interesting because I've got two teenage girls and they like recently started dating and stuff, and like they're looking for adventurous like
Mm.
boys. And like, they're very like one of them was recently dating someone that only did video games. And it's like it's hard, like because like they don't have anything in common. So like, and I think, risk and like getting out of your comfort zone like translates to other areas of your life and stuff. And
Yeah.
so
Yeah, such a good point. And what you were saying earlier about the kids uh assessing risk in nature, it makes sense, and how like the playground structures are so safe that kids can't like safely find that graded experience, like
yeah,
where it's either like all safe or you have to be super unsafe to get any challenge out of it. And so there's no in between there, but how
yeah,
nature provides that. And I also just love the point about the mixed ages play,
yeah,
and how important that is socially and developmentally, like for just, anyway, again, big plug for your book. Everybody should read it. I think it's
yeah.
so important. And I'm curious about the benefits of nature for adults as well. I know your main experiences with kiddos, but for adults who, again, dealing with brain injury can bring out primitive reflexes again. Like there's a lot of like developmental things that need to happen to help reintegrate, like get the brain back on track again. And so listening to this book has been very interesting of like, okay, these kinds of graded experiences and movement are necessary for adults too, especially those who are dealing with brain injury. How have you seen nature be beneficial for older people?
Yeah, no, I think it has the same benefits. I think young adults all the way through, like, even just walking on even terrain, that's going to start challenging their vestibular and balance sense. And, the bird sounds, like something as simple as just even listening to bird sounds actually helps with orientation of the body to the noises around them. Like, so you might hear a bird tweet in one direction, a bird tweet in another. And what that is doing is you're orienting yourself. And that orientation is the basis for spatial awareness. It's calming. That sensory integration, that organization in the brain happens when you're in a calm but alert state of mind. And, like we always talk about, like the colors outside, blues, browns are very calming. We paint our preschools those colors, right? We go for a massage and we hear crashing waves. It's very calming, but you're alert, right? The ground is uneven. You need to like kind of monitor your environment as you walk around. And that happens to be ideal state of sensory integration. So we want to think about what percentage of time are we in an environment that's conducive to that organization of the brain. And then what percentage of time are people spending in an environment that might be disorganizing or disrupting? There's a lot of transitions to the day. There's, a lot of noises. There's, it depends what our offices look like, our schools. Uh,
Mhm.
So, yeah.
Yeah, thank you. I the what you were saying about just the variety that you get outside. I know that with that's very helpful too with your visual system, like being able to look far away and then bring it back in. And like it's with when you're enclosed in walls, there's a
Hmm.
limit to your vision. There's
Yeah.
a limit to the sound localization that you have opportunity to experience, because there's a something blocking sound right behind you, and so you can't hear from, yeah, it's just I can
Oh,
see
interesting.
there's so many aspects to this that make outside just unique. You cannot replicate it inside.
Yes,
Which is,
absolutely.
yeah, just really interesting and makes sense to me. And how um maybe you can share some thoughts on this too. Like
Mhm.
I can see the benefits of outside for sensory regulation, and that there's just so much that we need that outside can provide that we can get inside. But do you have kiddos or adults even who feels too overwhelmed by the outside? Maybe if they're so used to being inside, that outside just feels overstimulating and too much. How long, like what does it take for somebody to get more at peace with being outside if it is dysregulating at first?
That's a good question. I mean that's kind of why I really champion getting even babies outside. um, obviously, I think it just takes time for older people, but if you can get babies outside from an early age, that's really important because I'm actually seeing people like afraid to even let babies crawl on the dirt and all that stuff. And so people wait until they're cognitively really aware because a lot of it is fear-based. And
Mm.
so they're very cognitively aware that they're going to be put in the sand. And so they're picking their legs up and you're screaming. But if you take a small infant and you start putting them in the dirt at an early age and they're crawling and they're starting to integrate that light touch sense as they crawl and get the deep pressure, and they're already being aware, like you so used to being outside, I think your chances of that are going to be greater. But I think just it being a positive experience and not a pressured thing, like it's going to be really important to like do it in a way that is comfortable for them. So like I talk a lot about children because that's my specialty, but for children, like instead of just sending them outside if they're not used to being outside, like go out there with them and then like maybe you play with them for a little bit, but then maybe you want to get them independent with play. So you kind of keep yourself busy. Like I'm gonna rake. So they just the comfort of knowing you're out there with them often helps reduce the fear. Because again, a lot of this is actually based on anxiety and fear. A lot, I think, even more so than the sensory piece.
Mm.
And because
Mm.
there's anxiety tied around that, and they're very anxious. And if they think there's no choice, they're going to fight it. And
Yeah.
so if they get exposed to meaningful situations, comfortable environments, it does change the game. Like at TimberNook, I'm going to give you an example. I had a little boy come one time that had plastic welly boots on, and he knew we were going to the giant mud puddles. He didn't want to go. And he's like, I know we're going there. And he's like, I'm not going to take these off. And I'm like, that's fine. You don't have to take your plastic boots off. So we went down, and what happened was kids were catching frogs. And that was super exciting to him. He went up to the edge of it and he was visibly getting excited. And the next thing I knew, he went in and the mud went into his plastic welly boots and he had socks on which feels gross. And so he came back out and said, "This is gross. Can I take this off?" And I'm like, "Sure." So he took his boots and socks off, went back in barefoot to catch frogs.
Mm.
Now, what's interesting is we told the mom about it later, and she said, "Do you know we had been working with him for 2 years in a clinic setting to get him to go barefoot, like on those plastic balance beams, unsuccessful. And here
Wow.
he is in mud going barefoot." And the beautiful thing about it was like he started going barefoot camping because it was a real environment. And
Mm.
so it translated over into other real environments. And now if I had said, I think you should try to take your shoes off, see, that's the issue. He would have said no, like, and it's a control thing. So what I've noticed about Timbernook is when kids have extreme anxiety or even selective mutism where they have extreme social anxiety, Timbernook's a great match because they always have a choice. There is no one telling them they have to play. Everything's an opportunity at Timbernook. And so
Mm.
they decide what they're ready for. They regulate that. And I think that's key is that choice. It without
Yeah.
putting pressure.
Yes, that's such a good point and so beautiful. That's such a beautiful story. I love it so much. Like it just speaks to the power of meaningful occupation, right?
Yeah,
Like things
yes,
that we care about will motivate us to do the things that we may
exactly.
that, like
Yes.
pull us out of our comfort zones. And I think as like transitioning that to adults who might be dealing with some of this stuff and maybe hesitant to go outside, maybe I love your point of do it with
Yeah.
somebody that you know and trust. If you're afraid, if the reason you're afraid of it is because what happens if I overexert myself and then I'm stuck outside and I can't get back
Yeah.
home. You like have those
Right.
things in place, understand what your fear is, and make sure that you have, contingency plans so that you can take care of those things, but allow yourself the opportunity to experience that. And then also the meaningful experiences outside, like in maybe it, have the family experience be at a park instead of inside, or like just the things that are going to arrange your life. Like you're an adult, so you can choose these things, but like maybe push yourself to encourage yourself to spend this time outside if it's not something that you're naturally inclined to want to
Yeah.
do.
Yes.
Arrange things so that you can do that. So I think that's really like beautiful
examples and ways that we can transition it to adults or other people who are dealing with similar things. So I really appreciate what you're doing, how you're doing it, and that this pull to nature and to outside, and what incredible benefits there are. And I know that there's tons of research on nature and the benefits of it, and you've seen it yourself, and are I imagine you see it every single day with the kids
Yeah.
who come there. I guess and I'm so sad that I have to like wrap this up because again, I could like talk to you all day about this. But I'm just curious, as you mentioned that so much of your story has not been your plan. It wasn't what you were expecting. I'm just curious, how do you feel looking back and seeing where you've ended up and how it's happened?
Yeah. So I think that boy, that's a good loaded question.
How do you
I mean, for me, this is God's work, and so it's very humbling to realize that, and it was really important for me to realize this wasn't my doing. It was me just saying yes and
feel?
responding to that invitation. But in that this is greater than me. There's a greater need. There's a children are really suffering, and so that keeps me going too, because I know that this is for children and that they really do need help, and it's the right timing. And so, yeah, but it is amazing looking back. You can see very clearly the path when you look back. Sometimes
Yeah.
when you're trying to look in you're like, what's happening? But yeah,
Yes.
yeah,
Yes, I get that. In the
yeah,
moment and looking forward, like,
yeah,
wow, what is happening? But yeah, looking back is the 2020 thing, right?
yeah, yeah, yeah,
But I love that. Thank you for saying yes as
yeah,
those opportunities have presented themselves. And I feel like it is God's work. You're making important things happen, and I appreciate what you're doing. If people are interested in learning more about TimberNook, or finding if there's one in their area, or hearing more from you, where would you direct them?
yeah. So we do have a new website, which is exciting, and our research is up there. With what happens when TimberNook goes into a school and how it's affecting the entire culture. So that's really exciting.
Great.
And so just TimberNook.com. We are on Instagram and Facebook as well. But yeah, those are the main sources.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you so much. I so appreciate your coming on and sharing this. I think it's just really, really important.
Yeah,
So,
thank you. Thanks
yeah,
for having me. It was a pleasure. I feel like I want to pick your brain for another hour, but
we should definitely keep
yeah.
chatting. So we'll do this again sometime. But thank you,
Yep,
thank
of
you.
course.
I'm so glad you listened in today. I hope you have gained some helpful insights and inspiration regarding dealing with and recovering from concussions. My goal is to create more awareness and education about concussions and the fact that there is so much that can be done to improve life after someone has had one. Help me spread the message by liking, commenting, rating, and subscribing to this podcast, and share it with others who would benefit from hearing it. There are more resources available on my website. And again, if you or someone you love would benefit from concussion coaching, sign up for a free consultation using the link in the show notes or at my website, www.theconcussioncoach.com. Thank you. See you next time, and take good care of that amazing brain of yours.